December 2nd, 2009, 11:34 p.m. A decorated war veteran makes a frantic 911 call from his suburban home in Coronado, California. She's not breathing, he tells the dispatcher, his voice shaking. I think she fell. When paramedics arrive 6 minutes later, they find 32-year-old Rebecca Zahau hanging from a second-floor balcony, her hands bound behind her back, her feet tied together, a t-shirt stuffed in her mouth. The scene is staged to look like suicide. But here's what made investigators stop cold. It would have been physically impossible for her to do this to herself. This case has everything that challenges our faith in justice, and what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about how far people will go to protect their own. This is the story of a case that divided a community, sparked national outrage, and left more questions than answers. A case where every piece of evidence pointed in one direction, but the official conclusion went another, where a young woman's death was ruled a suicide despite forensic experts calling it impossible. This is the Rebecca Zahau case, and it's one of the most controversial investigations in modern American history. Rebecca Zahau was born in Myanmar in 1979, the second of four sisters in a tight-knit family. She immigrated to the United States in her 20s, working hard to build a new life. Friends described her as gentle, soft-spoken, and deeply spiritual. She met Jonah Shacknai, a wealthy pharmaceutical executive, in 2008. Despite their age difference, Jonah being 54 and Rebecca 29, they fell in love. By 2009, they were living together in his historic mansion at 1043 Ocean Boulevard in Coronado, one of the most exclusive addresses in Southern California. The mansion itself was impressive, a 3-story Tudor-style estate overlooking the Pacific Ocean with 27 rooms and a storied past. It had once belonged to a prominent San Diego family and was worth several $1 million. Rebecca seemed happy there. She'd taken on a motherly role to Jonah's young son, 6-year-old Max, from a previous relationship. Neighbors rarely saw her, but when they did, she was always kind, always smiling. Before we unlock more details of this investigation, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Here at True Crime Vault, we bring you the cases that demand to be examined, the stories that deserve justice, new investigations every week. And please, share your thoughts in the comments as we go through this case, because you'll have plenty of them. July 11th, 2009, that's when everything changed. Rebecca was alone in the mansion with Max, while Jonah was out of town on business. According to the official timeline, around 10:40 a.m., Max was playing in the mansion. Somehow, he ended up going over the second-floor banister, falling approximately 16 feet onto the foyer floor below. Rebecca called 911 immediately, hysterical, reporting that Max had fallen and wasn't responding. She performed CPR until paramedics arrived. Max was rushed to Rady Children's Hospital in critical condition with severe head trauma. The injuries were catastrophic. Doctors gave him a grim prognosis. Jonah rushed back to San Diego, arriving at the hospital that evening. His ex-wife, Dina Shacknai, Max's mother, flew in from Arizona. The family gathered at the hospital, where Max clung to life on machines. The atmosphere was tense, grief-stricken, and according to later reports, there were questions about what had happened. How does a 6-year-old go over a banister? Was anyone else in the house? The circumstances of Max's fall would become central to understanding what happened next. Rebecca stayed at the mansion that night. According to phone records, she spoke with her sister Mary on the phone for over an hour. She was distraught, blaming herself, even though investigators would later find no evidence of foul play in Max's accident. It appeared to be a tragic accident, but the weight of guilt was crushing her. July 12, 2009. Rebecca spent the day at the hospital with Jonah and his family. The tension was palpable. Some family members were openly hostile toward her. There were accusations, whispers, blame being cast. By early evening, Rebecca returned to the mansion alone. She was emotionally devastated. Text messages recovered from her phone showed she was researching Max's type of injuries, praying for his recovery. That evening, around 11:30 p.m., Jonah's brother, Adam Shacknai, arrived at the mansion. Adam was 54 years old, a tugboat captain who'd driven down from Sacramento. He later stated he came to provide family support during the crisis. He claimed he saw Rebecca briefly, that she seemed upset, but they didn't have a lengthy conversation. Adam said he went to the guest house on the property to sleep. This is where the timeline becomes critical, because in less than 12 hours, Rebecca Zahau would be dead. July 13th, 2009, approximately 6:45 a.m. Adam Shacknai claims he woke up in the guest house and decided to go to the main mansion. He said he was going to work out in the courtyard. As he approached, he noticed something strange on the second-floor balcony. At first, he couldn't process what he was seeing. Then, the horror registered. A woman's body hanging from the balcony, suspended by an orange rope tied to the railing. Adam called 911 at 6:48 a.m. The call is chilling. He's breathing hard, sounds panicked. "There's a lady who's been hung in the main house," he tells the dispatcher. He said he'd cut her down and was attempting CPR. When first responders arrived 4 minutes later, they found Rebecca Zahau lying on the grass beneath the balcony, naked except for a long-sleeved shirt. She was cold to the touch. Paramedics attempted resuscitation, but knew immediately she'd been dead for hours. What they found at the scene would spark one of the most heated forensic debates in recent memory. Rebecca's wrists were bound behind her back with red rope, wrapped multiple times and knotted. Her ankles were bound together with the same type of rope. A t-shirt had been stuffed into her mouth and wrapped around her lower face. The orange rope around her neck was tied in an intricate nautical knot, then secured to the balcony railing. Her body showed signs of lividity consistent with hanging for several hours. But here's what made seasoned detectives pause. To hang herself, Rebecca would have had to bind her own hands behind her back with multiple complicated knots, tie her own feet together, gag herself, fashion a noose with a complex nautical knot, secure it to the balcony, and then, somehow, propel herself over the railing, all while naked in a mansion with other people nearby. The San Diego Sheriff's Department took over the investigation. Lead investigators included Detective Todd Whaley and Detective Angela Suida. They processed the scene meticulously. Inside the bedroom where the rope originated, they found more disturbing details. A message had been painted on the door in black paint. "She saved him. Can you save her?" The writing was in capital letters, crude and stark. Next to the door was a tube of black paint with a knife stuck in it, almost ceremonial in its placement. Investigators documented everything: the type of rope used, which was common marine rope, the knots, which were complex and required knowledge of nautical techniques, the paint message, the position of furniture. There were no signs of struggle in the room, no defensive wounds on Rebecca's body, no evidence of anyone else's DNA under her fingernails. Here's where the investigation took a turn that shocked everyone following the case. On September 2nd, 2009, after nearly 2 months of investigation, the San Diego Sheriff's Department held a press conference. Sheriff Bill Gore announced their findings. Rebecca Zahau's death was a suicide. The manner of binding, they claimed, while unusual, was possible for someone to do to themselves. The message on the door was interpreted as Rebecca's final statement about Max's accident. The bizarre staging, they suggested, was consistent with someone in extreme psychological distress, creating a dramatic final scene. The forensic pathologist, Dr. Jonathan Lucas, ruled the cause of death as hanging, manner of death, suicide. According to the official report, Rebecca had become overwhelmed with guilt over Max's accident, especially as his condition deteriorated. Faced with what she perceived as blame from Jonah's family, she took her own life in this elaborate manner. But here's what the Sheriff's Department couldn't adequately explain. The knots. Multiple rope and knot experts who later examined photos and reports stated that the binding on Rebecca's wrists would have been extremely difficult, if not impossible, for her to tie on herself. The configuration required a level of dexterity and leverage that wouldn't exist with your hands behind your back. Dr. Cyril Wecht, one of America's most renowned forensic pathologists, reviewed the case. His conclusion: homicide, without question. He pointed to multiple factors: the complexity of the binding, the lack of a suicide note beyond the cryptic door message, the absence of any documented mental health issues or previous suicide attempts. Dr. Wecht stated publicly that in his 50-plus years of experience, he'd never seen a suicide staged this way. Then there was the gagging. Why would someone intent on hanging themselves stuff a t-shirt in their mouth and wrap it around their face? Suicide by hanging is quick if done correctly. The gagging served no purpose unless it was to muffle screams. This detail haunted investigators who disagreed with the official ruling. The paint message became another point of controversy. Handwriting experts couldn't definitively say Rebecca wrote it. The phrasing was odd, stilted. She saved him. Can you save her? Doesn't read like a genuine suicide note. It reads like staging, like someone trying to create a narrative. Rebecca's family was devastated by the suicide ruling. They knew her. She was Buddhist, deeply religious, and her faith expressly forbade suicide. Her sister, Mary Zahau Lehner, became a fierce advocate for the truth. She hired her own experts, retained attorneys, and began a decade-long fight to have the case re-examined. What about Adam Shacknai? He maintained his story consistently. He was in the guest house, heard nothing unusual, discovered the body in the morning, cut her down, called 911. Phone records confirmed he made the emergency call, but there were questions. Why did he cut the body down? First responders are trained not to disturb a scene. Adam claimed instinct took over. He thought she might still be saved. But forensic experts noted that if Adam cut Rebecca down as he claimed, there should have been more evidence of that action, more disturbance to the knots and rope. The scene, they suggested, looked almost too pristine, too staged. Additionally, some experts questioned the timeline. Based on rigor mortis and lividity, Rebecca had likely been dead since sometime between midnight and 3 a.m. Where was Adam during those hours? Adam was polygraphed by the Sheriff's Department. He passed, though polygraphs are notoriously unreliable and inadmissible in court. He cooperated fully with investigators, gave DNA samples, allowed searches. No physical evidence linked him to Rebecca's death, at least not in the official investigation. Then tragedy struck again. On July 16, 2009, just 3 days after Rebecca's death, 6-year-old Max Shacknai died from his injuries. The little boy never regained consciousness. The family's nightmare was complete. 2 deaths in 1 week, both at the same mansion, both involving people Jonah Shacknai loved. The coincidence was too much for many to accept. Some theorized that Rebecca's death was revenge for Max's accident, that someone in the family blamed her and took justice into their own hands. Others suggested a murder-suicide scenario, that Rebecca did harm Max and then killed herself in elaborate fashion to draw attention. But investigators found zero evidence that Max's fall was anything but an accident. The case might have stayed closed if not for Rebecca's determined family. In 2013, they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Adam Shacknai. This civil action would do what the criminal investigation never did, put the evidence before a jury. The Zahau family retained high-powered attorneys and forensic experts. They were going to get their day in court. The civil trial began in March 2018, nearly 9 years after Rebecca's death. The proceedings lasted weeks and included testimony from dozens of witnesses and experts. The Zahau family's legal team presented a compelling alternative theory. Adam Shacknai killed Rebecca Zahau. Their experts testified about the impossibility of self-binding in the manner found. They brought in Dr. Judy Melinek, a forensic pathologist, who testified that the injuries and scene were consistent with homicide, not suicide. She noted that Rebecca had injuries to her scalp and head, bruising that suggested she'd been struck, or her head had impacted something with force before death. These injuries weren't adequately explained in the original autopsy report. The defense presented Adam's consistent denials. He testified in his own defense, maintaining his innocence, walking the jury through his version of events. Character witnesses described him as a gentle, non-violent person. The defense argued that the Zahau family, understandably grief-stricken, was looking for someone to blame for a tragedy that was actually a suicide. After deliberating, the jury reached a verdict. They found Adam Shacknai responsible for Rebecca Zahau's death. It was a civil verdict, not criminal, but it was a verdict nonetheless. The jury awarded the Zahau family over $5 million in damages. They had concluded, based on the preponderance of evidence standard in civil cases, that Adam, more likely than not, caused Rebecca's death. But the story doesn't end there. Adam Shacknai appealed the verdict, and in 2021, an appeals court overturned it, ordering a new trial. The court found that certain evidence had been improperly admitted, certain jury instructions unclear. The case was sent back to square one. As of the time of this investigation, a retrial has not yet occurred due to various legal complications and delays. So where does this leave us? Officially, Rebecca Zahau's death remains classified as suicide by the San Diego Sheriff's Department. They have never reopened the criminal investigation despite the civil jury's findings. Sheriff Gore, who has since retired, stood by the original conclusion until the end of his tenure. The department has faced fierce criticism for what many perceive as a botched investigation, a rush to judgment influenced by the wealth and prominence of the Shacknai family. Rebecca's family continues to fight. Mary Zahau-Leuner has become a prominent advocate for victims' rights, appearing on numerous television programs, speaking at conferences, keeping her sister's case in the public eye. She believes, and many agree, that if Rebecca had been from a wealthy family, if the people involved had been less prominent, the investigation would have been far more thorough. There are details that still haunt anyone who studies this case. The 911 call Adam made that morning, some audio analysts have suggested there are sounds in the background that were never adequately explained. The exact timeline of when Rebecca died versus when Adam claims to have discovered her. The fact that both deaths occurred while Jonah was conveniently away from the property. And then there's the door message. Handwriting experts hired by the Zahau family concluded the writing didn't match Rebecca's hand. They suggested it was written by someone trying to implicate her in Max's accident to create a motive for suicide. Think about the cold calculation that would require. Someone in that mansion, in the hours after Rebecca died, painted that message, positioned that knife in the paint tube, arranged the scene to tell a specific story. This case reveals troubling truths about our justice system, how wealth and connections can seemingly influence investigations, how first impressions and initial theories can blind investigators to contradicting evidence, how families without resources or influence struggle to get justice while well-connected individuals receive the benefit of every doubt. Dr. Wecht, who's consulted on countless high-profile cases, said something chilling about the Rebecca Zahau investigation. This is one of the clearest cases of homicide I've ever seen misclassified as suicide. The evidence screams murder, yet the official channels refuse to listen. What happened in that mansion on July 13, 2009? The evidence suggests Rebecca Zahau was attacked, possibly struck on the head, bound, gagged, and hanged from the balcony in a staged suicide scene. The person who did this had time, had knowledge of knots, had the physical strength to overpower her, and had the cold presence of mind to stage the scene elaborately. Adam Shacknai maintains his innocence to this day. He's never been criminally charged. He passed a polygraph. No forensic evidence definitively places him in Rebecca's room during the time of death, but he was the only other person on the property. The timeline, the opportunity, the nautical knots he would have known as a tugboat captain, it all points in one direction. Yet reasonable doubt remains, at least in the eyes of the criminal justice system. Some investigators have suggested other theories. Could someone else have been on the property? Could there have been an intruder? Security at the mansion was minimal. The property was large, with multiple access points, but there was no evidence of forced entry, no evidence of robbery, no evidence of anyone else's presence. The most logical suspect, if this was murder, was someone who was already there. The Shacknai family has suffered immensely. Jonah lost his young son and his girlfriend within days. He's maintained a dignified silence throughout the years, rarely speaking publicly. His ex-wife, Dinah, has also stayed out of the spotlight. Adam, thrust into the center of this nightmare, has had his reputation destroyed despite never facing criminal charges. If he's innocent, he's a victim too. If he's guilty, he's gotten away with murder. Rebecca Zahau was buried in her hometown, her family finally able to lay her to rest. But rest is elusive when justice remains undone. Her grave has become a place of pilgrimage for true crime enthusiasts, for people who follow this case and demand answers. Her family visits regularly, still fighting, still hoping that one day the truth will emerge definitively. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How much do we trust our justice system when it produces conclusions that defy common sense? When experts with decades of experience say, this is wrong, but institutions refuse to reconsider? When a civil jury, after hearing all the evidence, reaches a different conclusion than law enforcement? It makes us question humanity because somewhere in this story, someone did something monstrous. Either Rebecca Zahau, in the depths of despair, bound and hanged herself in one of the most bizarre suicide methods ever documented, or someone murdered her and staged the scene, counting on the suicide ruling to avoid prosecution. One of those scenarios is true. Both are deeply disturbing. The legal battles continue. The Zahow family has indicated they'll pursue the retrial of their civil case. They've also called for federal intervention, arguing that the local sheriff's department is too compromised to ever reopen the criminal investigation. Whether that will happen remains to be seen. The FBI has shown no indication of getting involved. Meanwhile, the mansion at 1043 Ocean Boulevard still stands, though it's changed hands several times since 2009. It's now owned by different people who were unconnected to these events, but the history lingers. Neighbors still whisper about what happened there. The address has become synonymous with tragedy and unanswered questions. What's perhaps most frustrating about this case is how preventable the controversy might have been. If the initial investigation had been more thorough, if detectives had seriously considered homicide from the beginning, if the forensic examination had been more comprehensive, we might have definitive answers. Instead, we have a ruling that many experts believe is wrong, evidence that was potentially overlooked, and a family denied closure. This is the Rebecca Zahow case, a young woman who came to America seeking a better life, who found love and happiness, who tried desperately to save a little boy's life, and who died under circumstances that remain hotly disputed 15 years later. Her death exposes the fault lines in our justice system, the ways wealth and power can tilt investigation, and the importance of families who refuse to give up. As you think about this case, consider what you believe. Look at the evidence. Think about the timeline, the physical impossibilities, the convenient explanations that don't quite add up. And ask yourself, what does your gut tell you happened in that mansion? Because sometimes, beneath all the official reports and legal proceedings, the truth is simpler and more terrible than anyone wants to admit. If this case troubled you, if it made you think about justice and truth and how far some people will go to hide both, make sure you're subscribed to True Crime Vault. Hit that like button and drop your theory in the comments below. What do you think really happened to Rebecca Zahow? Do you believe the suicide ruling, or do you think something far more sinister occurred? Let's discuss this case, because these conversations matter. These aren't just stories. These are real lives, real families still searching for truth, and real questions about the society we live in. Thank you for watching, and remember, some vaults should never be closed until justice is truly served.